Mama was still the most beautiful woman in the community. A little wild, she was, or so the English women regularly whispered, many of them still all bound up in their boned bodices and kirtles, tattered though they were. But who could blame her, being a survivor of captivity, and wife to the stern and wild Kurawoten man responsible for both snatching her away and bringing her back. 'Twas still the stuff of romantic legend more than 10 years later. Virginia Thomason Dare, affectionately known as Ginny to family in the community, watched the way the other women subtly deferred to her mother in matters both small and great. The men as well, if it came to that. Mama attended council as often as she could, often with a babe in arms, which no one minded. All the Kurawoten women did, and most of the English. And enough time had passed since their crossing that the English nearly stopped commenting on how strange it was that the women held leadership positions as strongly as the men. After all, Manteo, the Kurawoten who had been to England not once, but twice, may be Lord of Roanoke and de Semonguepeoc, as well as leader of the English, but his mother was still Werawansqua, or chief woman, of the Kurawoten themselves. Ginny rolled her eyes every time the subject was brought up. It made her feel both restless and irritable inside whenever they talked of the old country and its ways. True, the tools and devices they had brought were wondrous, although the limitations of such were beginning to show after so long. But how pitiful must their homeland of England be if they did not properly value their women? 'Twasn't like that, Mama would protest when Ginny would ask her about it. But then she would only shake her head when pressed to explain. At the moment, the discussions centered upon the question of whether to return to Kurawoten Island. Some had gone back a few seasons past. Others felt the mainland offered more in the way of good living. Several swung between that and the protection the island offered from their enemies. Ginny found it all just dreadfully dull. She caught the eye of Henry Harvey, seated halfway around the council circle. Though the bulk of his bark-brown hair was caught back in a tail, he sported a thin roach standing upright from forehead over the top of his head, mimicking the Kurawoten men. And none could gainsay him, since Georgie Howe, English himself but married to Manteo's oldest daughter, had taken to dressing his own hair in that fashion years ago. The spiky crest of hair bobbed when Henry's gaze snagged hers, and his eyes widened. Then he winked. Ginny sniffed and turned her attention back to the conversation. Best she feign interest than let him tempt her to sneak off into the forest. Henry was once one of her best playmates, but he'd gotten passing strange since her body had crossed the threshold of womanhood. He fancied himself a young man already, despite retaining a gangly frame and the high voice of childhood. If anything, his voice had gotten squeakier of late. Still, an escape into the surrounding forest and waters might be preferable to a slow death by tedium here. It wasn't as if this were anything but counsel. She'd never dream of slipping out from church services. And others came and went as needed. If anything important happened, Mama would tend to it, along with Papa Seesfar. With slow, casual movements, she unfolded from where she sat next to Tirzah Chapman, whispering that she'd return soon, and picked her way through the gathering. Outside, a light rain pattered, and she nearly went back in. The town lay mostly deserted, however, a few chickens scratching in the dirt, heedless of the drops falling on them, and hogs grunting contentedly in their pen under the trees. So after the barest hesitation, she took off. She waved to the guards at the gate. Where should she go, river or inland? She angled toward one, then the other, reveling in the wind against her skin, the strength of her slender legs as she ran faster. A figure loomed out of the shadows, keeping pace with her. Then another. Henry had followed, and Redbud, one of the Kurawoten lads. A laugh burst from her lungs, but then she had to give all breath to the race. She would not be bested by these two, neither of whom had gone through Huskanaw yet.